Hey everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco here with you today, and we are going to be looking at another exciting issue of the Amazing Spider-Man here on our Art of Spider-Man retrospective video series. Thanks everybody for coming in and checking out this video here on YouTube. Thank you if you have subscribed to the channel. I can't tell you how much that means to me, and thank you enough for doing that. If this is your first time coming in and you're saying what is going on, I have been doing this series of art retrospective videos based on the Amazing Spider-Man comic book series, going all the way back to the very first issue, basically being Amazing Fantasy number 15, that first appearance of Spider-Man. And we've gone into a deep dive looking at the art, looking at the psychology of storytelling, the techniques of comic book making, using the Amazing Spider-Man issues as our guide. So if this is your first time here, you'll definitely want to check out the playlist that I have here on the channel. Again, videos come out every Monday at 8 a.m. and go all the way back to Amazing Fantasy 15. So go ahead, check those out, and thank you for being a part of this with us. Today, we're looking at Amazing Spider-Man issue number 29, and I came into it not really sure what I was going to get into. Was this going to be a good issue? Was this going to be an okay issue? I knew we were looking at a returning villain, and sometimes that can be great, and sometimes it can be kind of a flop. It depends on, right, what happens. I got to tell you, spoilers, this turns out to be a very good issue. And there's a lot of stuff in here, both from an artistic standpoint and from a story standpoint, that I want to go over with you. I think you're going to enjoy. So without further ado, let's get into it by checking out the comic. Okay, so here we have the Amazing Spider-Man number 29, and this is the cover. As I have mentioned many times on the channel here, what we're looking at is a scanned PDF copy of the real, actual comic from the 1960s. So you can see there is weathering, there are some marks and things on the cover, and then down here you see this trademark. So this was scanned and collected in a digital format in 2004 by Marvel. And so what we're looking at includes not only the comic itself, but it's based on the original coloring, on the original newsprint, and features all of the ads. And I'm going to mention, normally we're talking about Spidey, we're talking about the story, but at the end of this, there's a really good ad that I just want to touch base on real quick, which I think is very funny and an interesting sign of the times. So cover, let's talk about it real quick. We've mentioned this before with, I think, issues where Spidey deals with, like, the Lizard, for example. That's a character that tends to be water-based. Drawing water is really hard. Drawing water in a two-dimensional space is difficult because it has three-dimensional volume. You have to have, it's both fluid, but it can also, like in the splashes, be sharp. It is semi-opaque, right? There's a certain point where you can't see through water anymore, but at the same time, it's also translucent. So in shallow water, you can see through it. So very difficult. What we've got here is a really nice example of how to draw water and how it affects it's affected by the things moving through it. We have Spidey and the Scorpion fighting. Now, you could have the whole cover all the way up to the title be water, and they're just underwater. He's chosen to put the water line here, so it's almost like we're looking at through a porthole halfway down the water line, and so you can see under and above. Again, just really emphasizes that they're thrashing around in the water. And then, of course, the coloring aspect is very nice. It's a little difficult to see on the Scorpion, and I think that's just a nature of the age of the paper and the printing. So normally these covers tend to be very dark in these scans compared to the actual original. But the tail here, the Scorpion's tail is very dark above the water. Underneath, he's this nice green. Usually he's a little bit brighter green. So they've added blue over the top of everything, including Spidey. So we see the blue of his costume is a much lighter blue. The red is turning to a purple tone compared to the bright red. And same with the Scorpion. There's a blue over the green, which is a great way of depicting water. We'll see that here in the issue. Of course, you have the bubbles and the splashes and the swirls. So Again, very effective. The one thing I did want to point out is we've talked about this a little bit. As a Gen Xer, I'm used to comic book stores and what we call the direct market. Now, when I was very young, you certainly would buy comics at your local grocery store, pharmacy, wherever, and you could pick them up and there you go, and you would get what you get. Sometimes you would get a couple issues in a row, and then you'd miss some or whatever. And then they started doing what's called the direct market, which is these comic book stores opened, and then the publishers were selling to the comic book stores and then buying from there. The reason that makes a difference is a comic book store can display this however they want. This is the only product they have is comic books. So usually you see racks, vertical racks, and the comics are put there, and you can see the whole cover. And so you can look around and let that cover catch your eye. In the old days, these went on what are called newsstands. And so it might be a rack in a store, a spinner rack, a newsstand, which was a set aside, usually box or small little pop-up kind of thing where you could buy your newspapers, your magazines, your stuff like that, and comics. And they would be stacked in front of each other. So what you might only see of the comic, because they would be stacked offsetting. So you'd have them like this. So the one in front would be slightly lower than the one in back, so you could see the title. So you might see the title. You're going to see that trade dress where it talks about never step on a scorpion. But most of the image could be covered by another comic. I bring it up just because there's so much work into this, and it's possible that based on where the water line is, where the main thrust of the characters is, although most of them is underwater, unless this one was in the front, it's possible you might not have seen that until you said, let's Spider-Man, let's see what's going on with Spider-Man this month. And then you pulled it out and went, whoa, look at that cover. That looks cool. Scorpion is back, and this is pretty interesting. So anyway, just some historical reference for you in terms of how this would have been presented to the public who was buying. I think it's kind of an interesting point to think about when you compare the cover composition and what it's trying to do. Yes, you're trying to sell with a very interesting image, but you have to make sure it's seen. So anyway, there's the cover. I think it works very, very well. Let's open up the issue. We have a splash page. I've been over this numerous times here on the channel. I am not a giant fan of the splash page that either recaps the issue, is sort of a second cover, or shows us something we're going to see later in the issue. I would rather use this page for storytelling because we have a limited number. And this is a time when these comics, for the most part, are have a beginning, middle, and conclusion within 20 pages or 22 pages or sometimes 18 pages or whatever the page count is, right? This isn't a 48-page comic. This isn't a 60-page comic, 100-page comic. We've got a limited amount of space and a story to tell it in. Now, we have seen in this series a few ongoing, meaning like there's a cliffhanger at the end and then the action starts up in the next issue. That becomes more of the standard with more modern comics as we move ahead. But here we definitely have some one and dones. And this is one of those examples. This is a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. And so I'd rather, every page is valuable. Every page is valuable. So for me, I'd rather see the story here, but this is a nice image. I did say one of the things that I thought from a psychology standpoint, why this would not work as a cover is because it looks like basically Spidey's won. Like this is the end of the fight and Spidey's won. We got a lot of damage. We have the Scorpion literally on his heels. He is leaning back. He is taking a haymaker punch from Spidey. He is not in a position to punch back. His tail's moving, but it's not that close. Spidey could dodge it. And then you have J. Jonah Jameson over here kind of cowering in terror, but he's not an immediate threat either. He could run off. So for me, I don't think this is as dramatic as this cover, where our hero seems in peril. And I think that's really important. When you buy a comic, even though in our heart of hearts we all know Spidey's not really going to lose. Or if he does, he'll come back and he'll win. the Scorpion's not going to kill him. He's not going to cripple him. He's not going to. He's the hero of the story, right? But we want that illusion of, well, maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the one. And this image doesn't really give me that. What I would like to see is maybe instead of the scorpion tail coming around, maybe if it's wrapped around Jonah, put Jonah in some peril. Maybe it's wrapped around Jonah's neck and he's struggling and Spidey's trying to punch the scorpion to get Jonah free. That would add a level of drama that even though it's not Spidey who's in trouble, maybe this is the episode where Jonah gets killed. That would, again, led me to go, ooh, okay, now I got to see what happens. If I know in the first image that it looks like Spidey's going to win, which I kind of thought to begin with, maybe I'm not as interested in. One last thing real quick. Here's a little coloring error I wanted to point out. So we've got, this is tough. And something to think about. If you are a comic book artist and you are drawing a lot of hyper detailed imagery with lots of separate elements to it. So like this one, you've got figures, you've got looks like kind of furniture, book, smashed pieces and walls, and debris flying around. Unless you're very clear, and because this, I guess the colors must have just felt like it blended in with the scorpion in terms of the line work and stuff. This piece of debris wasn't colored, and it ended up a coloring error there where it's green instead of the brown like it should be. So just be aware of that. You want to make sure that it is completely clear. If you're using somebody else to color, if you're not coloring your own work, make sure that it's really clear what pieces are what. And you can do that through your rendering. So if you render metal one way and wood a different way, that's going to help your colorist to identify what individual things are. So just a piece of advice. Here we go. So very quick, just from a plot perspective, we've just seen Peter Parker graduate from high school. So now he is a incoming college student, right? He hasn't actually started classes yet, and he makes a note that he needs to buy some new clothes. I find it interesting that it's a plot point that we have to change Peter out of the traditional jacket and tie or jacket and sweater kind of look that we've seen Peter in all along. Today's comics, people would just change clothes. It's not a big deal. But we have to make a point. Like if we're going to show Peter Parker wearing different clothes, it means something. And it's a plot point here that he's buying clothes. Also, interesting, he notes that the clothes that he has are getting tight. Now, obviously, Peter's not getting fat, but it does also note, and maybe there was some feedback from the fans, in the letters and things. We haven't gone into that in every issue. So if you're not a comic book reader per se, in the old days, I don't think they do it anymore. But in the old days, fans would write letters expressing their opinion on the story. Loved it, hated it, questions, whatever. And Marvel would, in DC, they'd pick and choose, and they would have a letter section in the back where they would print those letters and the responses. So that was really cool and something that would up the fan interaction and the fan ownership of the characters. Maybe that's something Marvel and DC should bring back if they're not doing it today. Fan interaction. Just thinking. Anyway, so maybe fans have noticed that Steve Ditko had been drawing Spider-Man much more muscular and bulky and went, hey, here's this guy. He gets superpowers. Now he's swinging around being a superhero every day. He's probably bulked up. And so this is reflected the fact that his clothes are tight and he's got to buy some new clothes. So anyway, thought that was really interesting. Love this big panel here. This is fantastic. I love seeing the dramatic moments captured in a big image because comics is a visual medium. And so very important that we see the Scorpion in all of his glory, his insanity in this face. It's such a weird, creepy mask, the way it molds around the mouth as opposed to it being like an open cutout around the mouth. It's like the costume is molded to his lips, so all you see is his teeth. Super creepy, great dark eyes. The only comment or the only criticism I would have is, in comics and most of visual storytelling in the Western world, we read everything from our left to our right. So we psychologically attribute motion and momentum, whether that's physical motion, physical momentum, or storytelling momentum, storytelling movement from left to right. So for me, I would like to see the Scorpion facing left. He's running away. He's heading to the future. He's not going backwards. He's also then facing these characters, even though they're not in the same scene. He's facing the characters that he is going to be looking at for revenge. And so to me, I would turn him around. The other part here is, and they've done it very well in these first few panels. He's breaking out of prison, heading to the right. He's leaping away. He's leaping over buildings, heading to the right. And all of a sudden, he makes a hard right-hand turn and starts heading in the other direction. I would keep going in that direction to the right of the page, moving us into the story. So again, it works as a great illustration. It's not a big deal. But it's a slight psychological storytelling technique that you could use that just makes it feel more flowing through. One of the ways that, so all of these pages are drawn individually. We've talked about this before. Comic book pages are drawn on basically an 11 by 17 piece of paper inside of a roughly 10 by 15 area. So all of your artwork has to be contained within that 10 by 15 area. That's what gives us the borders around the art. So when the book is printed and put together, the seam of the fold of the book isn't cutting into any of the art and blocking the imagery. So that's how you do it. So like for me, when I draw comic books, one of the things that I have found that helps me with things like this is I will actually put my comic pages, once I've drawn them, into a large portfolio so that I can turn it like it's a giant comic book and make sure that from page 1 to page 2 or the turn or whatever I'm looking at makes a lot of sense. And so this is one where, you know, maybe if Steve Ditko had looked at both of these images side by side, he might have come to the same conclusion I did, that, oh, maybe I should have drawn Scorpion in the other direction. Anyway, coming through here, just so, again, talking head stuff. We're getting into the Betty Brant, Peter Parker, Ned Leeds love triangle. Liz Allen, who was also part of that from Peter's high school class, she's now out of the picture. And so Peter's kind of, he thinks he's, you know, hey, let me see if I can warm this relationship with Betty back up. But she seems to be very interested in and actively engaging with Ned Leeds. So Peter's kind of the third wheel here. Jonah's notified that the Scorpion is loose, and if you remember, J. Jonah Jameson was the one who financed the creation of the Scorpion, and nobody knows that. So he helped create a supervillain with the idea that he was going to make a super being that could beat Spider-Man, and this guy went crazy, and he doesn't want to take the blame and doesn't want anybody to know. So what I mentioned here is the smiling Jonah, of course, is always a creepy thing. He's drawn super creepy on purpose to make us go, it's not right. This guy shouldn't be smiling. Well, what I especially liked about this is, you know, he's trying to cover up his involvement with the Scorpion, but I love the body language of the people behind him. So he's acting weird. He's talking weird. They don't say anything. Peter says something here later, but for now, they're all looking. Ned is a reporter, right? So maybe he senses something's going on. Peter certainly, you know, is pretty acute or pretty, you know, aware of things. And even Betty is looking at Jonah like, maybe something's going on here. So I really like that. It just gives us something, storytelling of the background characters that are basically just filling space, but their body language tells us everything we need to know. And then here, Peter, I enjoy this as well. I really like this usage. It's an older technique. I don't see it a ton anymore. Everybody uses, kind of realistic lighting effects and all the things that you can do with computer coloring. Here, we've just got Peter in solid red. Why is he red? Right? There's no red light. There's no sunset. There's nothing like that. Obviously, his skin hasn't suddenly really turned red. The reason is you have the cop here in a blue. You have Jonah, he's wearing a white shirt and of course the flesh tone and the yellow background. So we need a different color that's going to separate Peter in the foreground from them so that we look at it as almost two scenes in one panel. So it's a great, easy storytelling way to utilize your space without having to have one panel of the cop and Jonah talking and another panel of Peter reacting to what they're talking. It's like having two panels in one. And you do that by separating that color because visually they are separated in separate planes. Whereas here we have three figures. They're all lit similarly with where the light source is from the top. They all are in normal bright colors. They're all in the same space. And so, in fact, they are interacting with each other verbally. So that's the difference. And I think this is a really neat technique and something that may be lost in modern comics, again, because we have almost too much flexibility in the coloring options, and maybe something we should be thinking about bringing back. Again, note to self. Real quick, one note. Next week's episode, we're going to be looking at Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 2. King size, 72 pages. It's going to be a long video, folks, so next week, buckle up, but it's going to be a good one. The annuals are super, super cool, and that'll be a lot of fun to do. Hey, we've got another big panel, and this is, for me, I think I have notes here. I always have my notes with me. I think I note this. I say big panels. Yay, big panels. Probably no more than 5 times in this issue. Or no less than 5 times. I love it. I especially like here where we need to change the scene. So we've gone from the Daily Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson's office and him thinking about stuff to now Spidey swinging through the city, seeing if he can find the Scorpion. Now, so for me, again, as storytelling, when I write and draw my own stories, I would have this last panel of Jonah on the end of the previous page so that when I turn the page, it's a new scene and Spidey's here. But as we've noted, we've got limited space and Steve is got to tell the story within the parameters of the space he has. So he doesn't necessarily get to say, I'll add in 3 more pages if I need it, right? There's a limitation. And so he's got to fit it in. So how do you change scenes on the same page? Using this big panel to break up the rhythm of the story is a great, great, great way to change that scene. And so we have some really good swinging poses here, some down shots looking down as Spidey's swinging through the city. Terrific, terrific stuff. We have the Scorpion here. Again, just so creepy of a villain. Over the years, there's been a few changes to his costume. I think he gets goggles at different times, or he has kind of eye holes that are more like Spidey's, where it's sort of round. He's become sometimes it's more mechanical suit, sometimes it's not. But this original is just very creepy, very weird, and a really interesting design. Great body posture here, again, of somebody who is he more Scorpion than man at this point, right? The hunch with the tail kind of moving of its own accord, swishing around. Really nice body position there. Again, to emphasize the creepiness of the character. More good swings, Spidey through the city poses. Very nice wall hanging moment. We've talked about the Dutch angles. If you're not sure what a Dutch angle is, check out just about any of our past videos and you'll see me explain the Dutch angle, but great use here. And now we come back to the bugle, and Scorpion is caught up with Jonah. And what I noted here is just how cartoony this sequence is. And there's a couple other examples of it here in the issue. So, I mean, yes, we have a man swinging through the city, a guy climbing up a building. That is cartoonish. I mean, cartoonish in that it's not real. Nobody's climbing hand and foot up a ceiling. Nobody's swinging by a web through a city and then sticking to the wall. But the figure, the way that they move is not outside of the world of reality. The form, the way the body twists and turns makes sense within what we see of these characters. Here, the way Jonah reacts, right? The tail comes down and he flings backwards. These look like this could be out of a Sunday morning comic strip. Like, these motions remind me of things like Tintin or other classic, The Spirit, other classic kind of newspaper comic strip cartoon type stuff. So I think it's interesting that Steve would go to that element. And is it I'm speculating here, but is it a way to separate what would be a normal human being like J. Jonah Jameson, who isn't superhero? He can't duck and dodge and weave and balance and stuff the way a regular, with the way the Scorpion can or Spider-Man can. So are his reactions seemingly cartoony because he's a human being put into a crazy situation that's beyond his own physicality? Maybe I am definitely speculating a lot and putting more into it than it was. Maybe it's just a drawing. Sometimes a drawing is just a drawing. But I found it interesting that stylistically it's very different than what we see throughout the rest of, the way people move and jump and in the series. And this seemed very, again, cartoony was the best. It was the immediate term that came to mind for me. Another big panel. Yay, big panels. Great panel of Spidey jumping in and taking on the Scorpion. Nice detail here of even though Spidey's punching him, the tail and his foot still kind of lashing out and kind of clipping Jonah a little bit. Maybe just his tie, but still kind of clipping him. Real nice action pose here. I will say I did note that the way Spidey swings in through the window is very awkward. It's very well drawn. And if you said, how would a human being swinging at X miles per hour come through an open window without clipping the top, bottom, or sides of the window? There's nothing wrong with this pose. You would definitely want to tuck your feet up to make sure they don't clip, and you'd want to lean back, make yourself as thin as possible to get through there. Tuck that chin. Everything makes sense. But in a superhero comic, we're used to bending the laws of reality to make a more cool image. He could come in head first. He could swing in sideways. There's a bunch of different ways you could do it. This just felt awkward, even though, again, to be clear, it is exceptionally well drawn. The anatomy and the pose make perfect sense. I just found it a little awkward. Again, I like this here. So I just talked about here we have cartoony, which is almost a little like this. The situation is serious. This guy's he wants to kill Jonah. Like, that's the reality. Like, he's gonna smash him and he wants him dead. Like, you're done, man. So it's a serious situation, but there's comedy in the way that Jonah is reacting physically. And then in this one, we have this situation where Ned is trying to protect Betty, and as Spidey keeps fighting the Scorpion, he keeps getting knocked to the side over near where Ned and Betty are, and Ned is like, "Hey man, you gotta watch out, dude. Watch out for the tail." And Spidey, of course, is like, "Yeah." Rushes back in, biff, bam, pow, whap, boom, comes flying back, uh, where Ned and Betty are again. So I could picture this in a movie, TV, or comedy where this camera never moves off of Ned and Betty, and Spidey keeps getting thrown into the scene, uh, bounces back. I got it, and you hear the bang, bam, pow, poof, and then bang, comes back again. No, I got it this time. Runs back, bang, 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 pow, keeps getting knocked around. So the comedy aspect of it, in amongst a very serious and excellent action sequence, I think is a really nice touch. I think that's great. Another thing I pointed out, the upside down lettering of Spidey saying, "Ah, shut up." We've never really seen Spidey's lettering change based on his spatial orientation. He hangs upside down all the time. He's swinging, he hangs down in front of windows, and it's always right side up for the reader. Here, maybe because he's not being very nice. It's not very heroic for him to tell this guy, "Ah, shut up." Part of it is he's embarrassed. Part of it is he doesn't like Ned because he feels like Ned's moving in on Betty. I thought that was a neat little touch. So that's something straight from the letterer that would have been, so Stan Lee would have said, Spidey's going to say, shut up. And the letterer goes, watch this, I'll put it upside down. Again, just adding to the comedy in this little sequence here, which is really, really nice. And guess what? These next few pages, we've got more big panels, and these are terrific. The action's there. We see the situation around them, all the destruction. Again, more cartoony. Nobody would, even in this situation where you're trying to duck away that tail, the way the arms and legs are bent, this could be straight out of a Popeye comic strip, Plastic Man, like I said, Tintin, any of those sort of classic newspaper type comics to me this is what that feels like. I did note here, again, this is another example, much like the one with Peter, where he's all in red. Here you've got J. Jonah Jameson in the foreground reacting to what's going on. So you can kind of have two panels in one, and you color him gray because your figures behind you are so bright in their costumes. This, again, helps separate the two. And with this sort of vertical line of separation of Jonah here and then the other action here, you've taken that panel, kind of divided it diagonally, and again, it functions like two panels in one. So that is excellent use of space and storytelling with a simple color change. So terrific work. Again, neither Spidey nor Scorpion getting the upper hand, just tons of punching. Another great big panel. Let's see, where are we at here? Comedy, yep, upside down lettering, big panels, foreground, the colors pop, and more cartoony. And then this one here, J. Jonah Jameson yelling out the window. I think that's excellent. You've got great foreshortening of the hand and arm coming out of the window towards you. Again, the Dutch angle, we've talked about that. We see it here and here, turning that from 90 degrees, and him looking up, shaking his fist. Excellent emotion. Great kind of exclamation point on this sequence as the fight moves away from the Daily Bugle. So terrific image here. Great drawing, great illustration. And then I noted here, just destruction is really hard to draw. In order to draw something broken, you kind of have to know how it's constructed. So if you have a chair and you want to show a broken chair, you need to know what kind of pieces make a chair or a desk or a filing cabinet. You can fake it with just random bits and pieces, and you can do that a little bit to kind of fill in. You got some scraps of paper, you got some stuff sort of laying around, and again, a little bit of a wall, a little bit of a this and that. But if you don't have anything that's recognizable, it won't mean anything to the reader. So you've got to have recognizable things that are broken, which means, again, you kind of have to know how they're constructed. So it's a lot harder than you think. And There are some people who are excellent at it. Steve Ditko here has done an excellent job with destruction. The other one I always think does a great job is John Byrne. John Byrne did excellent rubble, debris, destruction. Really, really good. Some of those, if you want to look, some of those Fantastic Four issues that John Byrne wrote and illustrated have some amazing destruction. Cars, cities, buildings, roadways, pipes, like excellent stuff. And man, I'm telling you, this is the big panel issue, and I am happy. We've got the next page, 4 big panels. This is awesome. We very rarely see this in comics of this era. This is a terrific use. So yes, they're fighting. Could we have lots more panels with more punches being thrown? We could, but the impact on every one of these and setting up what's going to happen next is correct, is crucial, and is awesome. I just really like every one of these. The pose, the way we're moving the camera around. We've got even a long shot, or a wide shot, I guess you'd call it, because we're far away. Terrific stuff. Excellent panels. Really love these. Now we're getting to the point where Spidey pretty quick is going to get the upper hand. And again, so far, they were fighting in close quarters. Lots of punches. Now he can kind of use his webbing to his advantage. And then we're going to get to the water. So here we get into where the cover is. So we've gone almost through the whole issue before getting to sort of this scene where the cover is. And this is that water battle. We see that right here. As I mentioned on the cover, I like using blue when they are underwater versus your normal bright colors above. I think that's a great way to help us, a reader, especially a kid, maybe identify that, yes, this is underwater. So the plan, he gets the Scorpion underwater, where Spidey feels he's still more agile underwater, and now he can use his webbing to web him up underwater. Great use, again, of all the tropes and all the techniques we talked about. Breaking the surface, splashes, swoops, bubbles, all the things that help us get the feel that it's underwater. I did note here that there are, at this section here, and then these panels here, Spidey is somehow talking underwater. And I wrote, the note that I put to myself is, Stan can't help himself. So the process of what they call the Marvel method, I think we've talked about this before, but let me just very quickly recap. There is a plot that is created, a plot that is written or discussed. The plot is the general story. The Scorpion breaks out of jail, goes after J. Jonah Jameson. Spidey goes and confronts him, chases him out of the Bugle, and then defeats him in the water, in the harbor. Great. That's the plot. We're good. Now, other details in there, like Betty and Ned, plot elements about Peter changing his clothes, all those little things get added in later. But the general plot is that main through storyline. And that was created by Steve. Steve Ditko, the artist, created this plot idea. Then it gets fleshed out maybe more, right? So then we start to go, well, let's add in the clothing storyline. Let's make sure we get some stuff with Betty Brant, because Liz Allen is out of the story now. So in terms of, we've always got Peter in some romance kind of angle, let's make sure we address Betty Brant, all that kind of stuff. That all gets added in. Then the issue is drawn. So Steve Ditko then draws the issue and then gives it to Stan and says, here you go. Here's the pictures. Based on what I drew, you write the dialogue. And that's how it works. Now, some writers are more collaborative. By the time we're getting to this point, Steve and Stan are not on the same page professionally necessarily. Obviously, the sales of Spider-Man and the work is good, but personally, it seems like the two aren't seeing eye to eye, and that just continues. So Steve draws Spider-Man underwater, But Stan is the master of, he can't let a moment go by without somebody saying something to help explain to the reader what's happening. So Spidey is talking out loud underwater and not drowning, because you can't just have a panel sit in silence when you're Stan Lee. I mean, you look, there isn't a single panel, even this one, where you don't see any figures. Two human beings drop into the water. There still has to be a narration at the top. You can't just let the image lie. And so anyway, that was my note there. Spidey talking underwater and somehow not drowning. Impressive. And then we wrap it up. The cops come. Peter heads home, talks to Aunt May, tries to call Betty. All the drama and all the excitement, she's resting on the couch, and Ned is taking care of her. So we're starting to see that separation of Peter and Betty, and kind of the beginning of the end of that relationship, I think. And then lastly here, we've got Aunt May, and Aunt May is sick again, but she's trying to keep it from Peter. So we have the trope of sick Aunt May. And so how is that going to impact Spidey and Peter in the future as we move ahead? So that's where we end. So it's pretty standard. That's how we're going to end up things, and not unusual. Now, I did mention there's some ads here in the back, and this was an ad that isn't Spidey related that I did want to know. Oh, here's the letters page, by the way. So we haven't gone through these. We're not going to read these here on the series, but I think it is really neat to go back to old comics and see those letters and what the fans were talking about. And then, of course, the responses. So very cool fan interaction. One of the things I think that helped set, at the time, these old comics apart were, again, maybe we need to get back to that. No, here's the ad I wanted to talk about. Government surplus by mail. So you can buy something and then you get a whole bunch more for free, and the listing of things that you could buy. So again, this is, you put your name, your address, your city, your state, to get a catalog of stuff that you can buy, again, by mail. And here are some of the things. So you could have a kid, right? You could have a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid maybe goes, you know what? Sure would like to have a machete for $2. $2.15 machete. Or buy a U.S. military paratrooper parachute for $22 and watch your kid try to jump off the roof and parachute. Or how about a steel axe for $2.70? Now, again, if you're an adult and you're buying these things, no problem. But the fact that it was mail order, you could order it direct by mail for as little as 2 cents and 3 cents on the dollar. Look at this stuff. You can get mine detectors, hand and leg irons, a Jeep for $278, a rubber boat for $178. Like, this is crazy stuff. An airplane? What kind of airplane? This is insane. And so, yeah, I think it even says ammo. So you can't actually buy firearms, but you can buy the ammo, even as a child, by mail in the 60s from this mail order catalog. Cracked me up. I thought it was hilarious. Again, something that we just wouldn't see today. So that's the end of the issue. Let's cut back over here to the desk and we'll wrap everything up. All right, so that was the Amazing Spider-Man number 29. Great issue. A lot of really cool stuff artistically, things that you could really dig into if you want to take some real serious notes on how to tell stories in comics. Even though this is much, it's older and it's a different style, so many of these things still apply to modern comics today. So there's a lot of lessons we could learn there. Great storytelling. Great visuals, cool action, comedy, a little cartooning. It's got a little bit of everything and a lot more big panel art than we've seen in the past that I really like. I think the impact of that really makes a big deal. And so, again, if I'm rating this issue out of 10, I'm giving this one an 8. This is an 8 out of 10 for me. Um, Even though it's a one and done story, there's not a ton happening as far as moving the general plot of Peter forward. Him and Betty Branner on the rocks. Aunt May maybe getting sick again. Peter got some new clothes. The Scorpion broke out of jail. He's going right back to jail. So kind of one of those where nothing really happened. It's not at the end. We're kind of where we were at the beginning of the issue. But everything that happens in between the cover and the back cover is excellent. So again, 8 out of 10. Highly recommend it. Great issue. Hope you enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for coming and checking out this video with me. I know this one's a little bit longer, but we had a lot to talk about. It was well worthwhile. Don't forget, these videos do come out every Monday, 8 a.m. So check out, make sure you subscribe to the channel, check for notifications so that you know when the video comes out and be able to check out the next one. Next week, we are going to be talking about The Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 2, a 72-page story. So big issue. So it's going to be a big video. Check it out. A lot of fun. As well, check me out on all my social media platforms. You can always find me just by my name, Jerry Rasco. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, X, and Instagram. I post information about upcoming art I'm doing, projects I'm doing, shows that we're going to do, all kinds of that stuff. So follow along, join us here, and thank you so much. We'll talk to you next week when we look at more Amazing Spider-Man. Thanks.